Welcome to Filmcopat. Today we have with us Mr. Aseem Chhabra. He is a renowned film journalist in New York City. He has been a commentator of Indian cinema on CNN, BBC, Good Morning America, and so many more. He's also the festival director of New York India Film Festival, the largest and the oldest film festival in North America. Writer of biographies on Shashi Kapoor, Irrfan Khan, and Priyanka Chopra. Aseem ji, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. This is my pleasure. Thank you.
Today we will discuss Irrfan Khan, the man, the dreamer, the star. Also the name of his biography, book by you. You start the book by saying, "Ek aisa kalakar jiski aankhein afsane kehti ho." An actor whose eyes narrate a sea of stories. Such a beautiful verse to start the book. While we do realize why any cinema enthusiast will be motivated to write, speak, talk about Irrfan Khan, we would like to know what particularly drove you towards writing his biography.
Well, I mean, I'll give you a practical answer, really, honestly speaking, because what happens is when you write one book and it's done well in terms of critical review and people talk about it, then there's pressure to write the next book. So, which happened on once I'd done the Shashi Kapoor book, there was pressure to write another book, and many ideas are given to you by publishers. After a while, I finally agreed to do the Priyanka book. And while the Priyanka book was still being edited, it was last stage editing, they started asking me, what's next? And I, again, went back and forth. I mean, they gave me some names and I kept saying, I know I can't do this. I don't want to do this. The thing is that, when you write a book, especially a biography, and each time I've done this, it's taken me about 1.5 to 2 years from the time I start to the time the book is out. You spend a lot of time thinking about the person. You spend a lot of time watching films. If there's a film actor or director, you spend a lot of time reading about this person. You spend a lot of time interviewing people. So you really have to care and like the person to spend that much of time, really. And that was very important for me that while they were giving me names, I wanted to write about somebody who I had passion about this person, that I liked this person a lot as an actor. But more important, that I would feel that I could learn a lot more about this person and hence share that information, because I didn't know everything about Irrfan before I started writing the book. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the book that I did not know about. And that's very important, to be able to accept that, because I cannot write about an actor or a director or whatever if I don't like the human being as a person. So, we went back and forth, and then finally the Irrfan name was suggested to me, and I jumped at it immediately. I said, yes, that I would love to work on. And it so happened that around the time I was saying yes, and by the time this went through a couple of months, and by the time I signed my contract, Irrfan had this is in 2018 spring, he had just announced on Twitter that he was unwell. And then I was very nervous about, how can I write this book without talking to him? And I actually did have a brief phone call conversation with him, which I write about in the introduction itself. Through his manager, I spoke to him in London. But I was never able to interview him, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But it had to be somebody I really cared about, and I really wanted to spend more time understanding and researching that person. So yeah.
If I may have a follow-up on that, why do you particularly care about Irrfan so much? Why?
He was a fantastic actor. I mean, I would say there are about 6 or 7 of Irrfan's films. I mean, I write about many more, which are among the top-notch films when somebody writes the history of Indian cinema or 200 films of Indian cinema in the recent years. I mean, whether it's Namesake or whether it's Lunchbox, whether it's Pan Singh Tomar or whether it's The Warrior, and a few others will come to my mind. Qissa, for instance. He, as an actor, he would completely submerge himself into the role. He would become that person. And he would use his eyes, which not many actors do that. I mean, Irrfan had these very powerful eyes, and he had, these bulging eyes. But he knew how to express emotions through his eyes, which in India, many actors don't do that really. And, you can see his sorrow, his loneliness when he expresses when joy. That is a great hallmark of an actor, and I had liked him a lot. And so I jumped at the opportunity. I said, yes, I would definitely write about him because I wanted to learn more about this man, really. So yeah, that's the reason.
Actually, there seemed to be some divine connection when someone with some expressive eyes like him makes his big screen debut with a movie named Drishti in 1990. And I'm discounting the small role in Salam Bombay. But anyway, it really took a long time for him to be finally noticed in 2003 with Hustle. So it's 1990 to 2003. In between, he had been part of many prominent films in small roles and made mark in popular TV series like Chandrakanta and Manoya na Mano. But
Hmm.
how do you perceive the period from Drishti to Hasil, and how much struggle shaped him to what he eventually became in coming years?
Oh, a lot. I mean, he was very, very disappointed with the way his life was shaping out because, at the time when he graduated from National School of Drama, the so-called new wave of Indian cinema, in which Om Puri and Shabana Azmi and Smita Patil and Nasiruddin Shah, they had thrived in that in the 70s and early 80s. That had completely come to an halt. Television was picking up. There was some filmmaker like Govind Nilani and Shyam Benegal. They were still making some decent films, and that Govind Nilani actually cast him in Drishti. And Irfan jumped at whatever work he could get. He did actually 3 films with Govind Nilani. 2 were television plays, Western plays done in Hindi. But he had to survive. He had moved to Bombay. He was living with his girlfriend. They got married at some point. And the only way he could survive was he would take whatever work would come his way. So he started taking television. But as I write about it, he was very, very disappointed. There were maybe a handful of television plays or shows that he really thought they were interesting. Otherwise, he was not being challenged as an actor. And that is not what he had sort of agreed to do when he, joined National School of Drama. He wanted to be an actor where he could discover so much more in him. So when you mentioned Pansing Tomar, actually, not Pansing Tomar, Hasil may have been the first, or Makbul probably was released a little earlier, around the same time. But he did a film before that, a film called The Warrior, which was in 2000. He shot the film, directed by Asif Kapadia, this Indian-British filmmaker. And he managed to get the role only because Tigmanshu Dhulia was his friend from National School of Drama days. And Tigmanshu Dhulia had done some casting work for Bandit Queen, and hence he had gotten the title of Bandit Queen as a casting director. And when Asif Kapadia came to India, he was looking for a casting director, and Tigmanshu then recommended Irfan's name. It took a while. There were many auditions, and I don't think Asif Kapadia was initially absolutely convinced. But when Irfan got the role, he suddenly realized that is what he had been struggling and striving to do for almost 10 years. Because he talks about how, he was doing the same role for about 2 months period, and he saw the character arc, developing. His character was developing as the script sort of advances, the story advances, which is not what television will make him do. Because in television, he would come every day and he would get paid, but with the same role again and again and again. There was no television, very few television directors really wanted to explore and challenge filmmakers, actors really. So yeah, Warrior was the first thing. Warrior never it went to a couple of festivals in India, never got released in India, and even the release in the US was delayed. And yeah, then of course he got Hasil and he got Makbul, which really established him.
Talking about his eyes again, you'd mentioned that Meera Nair once told you that she was drawn to his hooded eyes. It seems like the West is all particularly moved by his eyes. Even Tom Hanks told in promoting Inferno, I am bewildered by his magical eyes. So when you spoke to Meera Nair, we would be very interested to know what she discussed and what is about Irfan that attracted her. What did she tell you in the interviews?
Well, most of it that she told me is in the book in any case. But, Meera went to National School of Drama because she was looking for, when she was about to cast Salam Bombay, she was looking for a mix of non-actors, which are all the street kids, and some trained actors, because she had Anita Kanwal and she had Raghuveer Yadav, who had already been, and what's the guy's name, the tall actor? What's come to me in a second? while she had them. But so she basically just went to see if she could find some actors. So she went to there was a workshop going on in a basement theater, and she just sat there and examined all of the actors in Irrfan's class, and it was Irrfan that drew her attention. And she looked at him, and there was something about his performance, something about his personality, something about his body and his body language that attracted her. And then she came back the next day again, just to make sure that she was right in her judgment. And which is when she then approached Irrfan and said that we would like to come to Bombay, and we're going to do a workshop for about a couple of months with all the actors, including the street kids, after which I would like to cast you in Salaam Bombay. And he jumped at it because he was still in school, in that school of drama. And that is what he wanted to do. He came from Jaipur to act in films. I mean, although he lied his way when he went to that school of drama, he told them that he wanted to only act in plays. And of course, you know that, after 2 months of the workshop, Meera had to make the difficult decision of not casting him, because she realized that he didn't fit into the scene with all the street kids, because they were undernourished. And Irrfan grew up, although Irrfan was very thin, but his body structure still showed that he of course grew up in a middle class family, and he'd been fed well as such.
Yeah.
And then so Irrfan was very, very disappointed. Meera then gave him a very brief role. There's a wonderful couple of minutes role, which is people have seen it. It's also on YouTube.
Yes.
So Irrfan was very, very disappointed. And then, but Meera said, "Look, listen, I will make it up for you." And it took her a very long time. She did. Yeah, but Namesake, and she did also 2 other short films with him, in the 2000s. One's called Migration and one's called Kosher Vegetarian. And she wanted to give him more work if possible. She recently talked about how one of the characters in A Suitable Boy, she had thought of giving that to Irrfan.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Staying on Meera Nair, you mentioned about your telephonic conversation with Irrfan, which felt like a heartfelt anecdote revolving around one of your favorite films, actually, The Namesake. The Namesake is a perfect example of how an actor can communicate using his or her body. One of our friends, Paroma from YouTube channel Cinema Wali, made a beautiful video on that same. Would you like to talk about Irrfan in Namesake and why that performance moved you so much?
Everything about Namesake, starting with the novel by Jhumpa Lahiri itself, I had read it and I loved it a lot. And first of all, I have a personal connection with Namesake. I mean, having lived in America and being an immigrant there for a very, very long time, the story of the immigrants that Jhumpa Lahiri explores, I immediately emotionally connected with that. Even though my immigrant experience had been somewhat different. My class experience where I came from in India was somewhat different. And, there are all sorts of immigrants, but I could still, their excitement, their disappointment, their joy, their, sadness in life, I could understand all of that. The script written by Suni Talpurwala is just magical. And then it is, of course, Meera Nair who directed all the actors. As Meera had told me, she told me that Irrfan was supposed to be Ashok Ganguly from the very beginning. And there were other actors that she went back and forth trying to figure out, including Tabu's role was, initially given to Rani Mukherjee, then it was given to Konkana Sen Sharma. Eventually Tabu took the role, as was Gogol Ganguly's role also. But Irrfan was supposed to be the role. Irrfan played that role. I mean, there is obviously this connection between Irrfan and Tabu. They had done a very different film, Maqbool. But, Irrfan, with the accent, the Bengali accent that he worked on, I mean, even though his wife is Bengali, it still took him a while to get that Bengali accent right. And he actually said that at one point his accent had become so pronounced that she had to ask him to tone it down, because when he was speaking English, she didn't want to subtitle it again, because the film was also meant for Western audiences. But it is the quietness in which he performs the role of Ashok Ganguly. There are so many magical, quiet moments. There's a lovely scene between Irrfan and Tabu just before she goes to drop him at the airport, before he leaves to Cleveland. That's the last time they spent together. And they just sit and drink tea. Completely quietly, they're just sipping chai, sitting in a corner on these chairs in the kitchen. And Meera said, she was inspired by looking at her in-laws, how they would just spend a quiet time with each other. And that is what couples of a certain age, a certain time, would express their love, their caring for each other without uttering a word. And immediately after, there's a scene. Tabu takes him to the airport, and Irfan is standing in the line to check in. And at one point, he just sort of tilts his head, and she also tilts his head. I'm not saying it's necessarily a Bangla way of doing it. A lot of Indians, we all use our head like that. But it is so pure and real and simple, and yet so magical. And the way Irfan does it, he was so believable as Ashok Ganguly. And you see him aging. You see the man again and again trying and attempting to talk to his son and trying to explain to him what that book by Gogol meant. And being hit by disappointment after disappointment and accepting his disappointment. That his son was born in America and his son is very different than him. And maybe he will not be able to get across. He finally does tell his son. That's a very, very beautiful, sad scene when they're both sitting in the car. I don't think anyone else, no other actor in India could have performed Ashok Ganguly. I mean, it's just absolutely stunning what Irfan did. I'm sorry, my answer was too long.
No. Of course, we are all Bengalis, and we felt exactly the same. Like the way there's this scene where he takes his son in the sea. They walk through.
God.
Yeah, that scene and that pronunciation of Gogol. I mean, that tone.
Yeah.
That's how my father would call me. So that tenderness, that beauty, that brings tears to your eyes.
It does bring tears to your eyes. And the way he says to his son that, they forget to take the camera, and he says, we'll just have to remember it. And the boy says, how long do we have to remember it? So, yeah. It was a special film.
I actually turned off the camera for the same reason. Like anyway, I recollected those scenes and all.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's precious.
No.
It's okay. It's okay to cry, man. Namesake makes me cry every time I watch it. I've seen at least 6-7 times. So yeah.
Right.
Even when he's calling Ashima from the hospital, it feels he knows it's coming.
Yeah.
So amazing. Once you are over with the.
Yeah.
Yes,
he puts his hand. I don't know if you know that he puts his hand on the telephone booth, and Meera's often used hands, and she was inspired by a very well-known American photographer who also has a similar scene of a man talking in a phone booth with his hand. And he says, "Ashima, don't worry, I'm okay." So.
Yeah,
Namesake is such a beauty.
Yeah.
Even in front of the Victoria Memorial.
Oh my God! It's so lovely when she says to him, "Do you want me to say like the Americans that I love you?" And he's go, "Huh." And that's a very Bengali mannerism. And the way he says, "Huh."
Exactly.
Actually, after Irfan's death, Varun Grover posted that pic on his Twitter timeline when he and Tabu are there in front of Victoria Memorial.
Right.
And the greatness of Irfan is that you can just remember the entire scene with that one pic.
Yes.
You do not need any more pointers. You can recall. You can literally hear his voice.
Exactly.
I'm hearing it right. I'm hearing it right now that we are talking about it, right? Yeah. So,
any great film, the narrative, the story, it's all fine. But even if you just look it from a shot, just that sequence, that makes a film great. And the Namesake had so many of them.
Yeah, there are many other moments and some I write about in the book, and some when you watch the film, and the lovely scene when they're sitting by Taj Mahal, and she says how beautiful this is, and then he, in a sort of a sarcastic tone, he says, Ashima, a lot of other husbands also love their wives, but they can't afford to build a Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
True.
Okay.
So actually, I'm moving from his eyes and Namesake. So earlier we had given a tribute to Irrfan Khan, where we mentioned that apart from his charisma, he had tremendous energy, which was prominently brought to the forefront with Pan Singh Tomar. and I'm sure like everyone loves the film. So that was a film demanding significant physical strain.
Yes.
And we also know Irfan loved preparing for a character in detail. And you also had an interview with Tigmanshu Dhulia on
Yeah.
Irfan Khan.
Yeah.
Was there any discussion on how Irfan prepared for that role?
Yes. And
And
the
we will
thing is,
also love. Sorry, yeah, please go ahead.
Irfan was probably in his early 40s when he played that role, and he's playing a
Mhm.
role of a sportsman,
Athlete. Yes.
athlete in his 20s.
Yeah.
And Irfan trained to run, for instance, and trained to do a steeplechase. I mean, he trained all of that. And he, in fact, very beginning of the shoot of the film itself, I mean, I write that in the book of the Guachuroni, that Irfan, he injured himself, and he pulled a ligament or something. It was a fairly serious, it was not just a sprain or something. And he continued, and they were in some small, they were in Ranchi, not even Ranchi, somewhere outside, somewhere in Jharkhand, Bihar, and didn't have access to medical attention, doctors. So yeah, that film required him to, many other films also, even in Namesake, he starts off as a young man and then, grows to be an old father. But Pansing Tomar is a very physical film, including this latter part of the film when he becomes a dacoit and they're running in the Chambal area and all of that. But Irfan carried the film. That film also had a very, the arc of the character, the tragedy of this character, that what leads him to become a dacoit. It makes you so angry, and it's so heartbreaking what he has to go through. So it's a fantastic performance, very, very powerful performance, a very, very sort of it's almost like an epic kind of a film.
Yeah. And also, thanks to your book, we got snippets of few of his great interviews, and one such is his interaction with press just after screening of Lunchbox in Toronto International Film Festival.
I was there. Yeah.
So did you heard him saying that, like, he said, like, no producer or director wants to cast me in love stories.
So
they don't see love in me. Yeah.
What happened was, this was at the Roy Albertson Theatre. So you know Toronto, right? It's right on King Street,
right.
the big auditorium.
Right on the.
And they started the film, and so like 5 minutes it's going on, and I'm hearing the film in Hindi, and it didn't occur to me that the subtitles were not coming. There was something wrong with the DCP. There was something wrong with the DCP, where the subtitles file was not matching with the actual file. So they had to stop the screening, and it took them almost 40 minutes to fix the problem. And in that 40 minutes, people got restless, but but then Ritesh Batra, the director, came up on stage, and Irfan came up on stage. And they started having a conversation, and then the audiences started asking people Irfan questions, even at a point where nobody had seen the film. So they didn't know what, So one of the questions asked, Irfan said that, he doesn't get too many romantic roles, and he was hoping that with Lunchbox, he might be considered a romantic hero as such. I was there.
Yeah, but you also on the other hand called him extremely sexy and appreciated his romantic roles in films like Piku.
Piku,
so like
the romance in Piku is so, it's so just Irfan. In fact, in the book, I sort of talk about how like Farooq Sheikh, for instance, Farooq Sheikh had his Farooq Sheikh way of being romantic. Bollywood romance is very typical. People say Shah Rukh Khan is very romantic, but all of these actors have played romantic roles. But Irfan's the romance he played was his own way. It was his own quietness and the subtle romance. And the beauty about Piku is that even till the end of the film, it's not like they are hugging and kissing and saying, "Let's get married." They're playing badminton. They become friends. We hope that will lead to something more. But there are several moments where he just stares at Deepika. Sometimes he stares at Deepika in complete disbelief, that I cannot believe how crazy your father is and how crazy your relationship is with your father. But there are other times he's in much admiration. He looks at her. And so it was a very... It's a kind of romance that we understand in real life. It's not romance that's defined in Hindi cinema. There are many people who are not able to express. They don't even know if they're in love. You're with a girl. You you like spending time with a girl, you joke, you look at each other, but you don't say I love you, or you don't hold hands. You sense there's something happening, that you like being with this person, which is what is happening in Irfan's case. Although during the whole road journey, you have Amitabh Bachchan who's driving everybody nuts. So at all times, Irfan cannot feel that he feels love. He's like at some, there are moments he's like absolute disbelief. Where the hell am I? Stuck with this father and daughter company. But yes, I thought he was very sexy in that film. And again, people, the actors like Hrithik Roshan, people think that that's what sexiness, etc. But Irfan had his own way of sort of defining sexy. So
yeah, and actually I have read in your book, you quoted Tigmanchu Dhulia. He said something that, okay, Irfan's sex appeal will appeal to the intellectual woman and not the frivolous one. I know that is controversial, but yeah, I mean, somewhere I can understand that, because yeah, I mean, that's how it is when I think of opposite gender. But let's not get into that.
It's not kind of only in the body, it's kind of the whole thing,
Yeah,
a
it's
cerebral person.
cerebral.
Yeah.
Just
Exactly.
would like to make a point that this is the Irfan and Piku, and then just now we talked about Irfan and Pan Singh Tomar, and before that Namesake. Such different characters at the end of the
Exactly.
day, and each of them stay with you for a different reason altogether. Right? You appreciate Pan Singh's struggle, and you appreciate the nonchalance of this person in Piku.
Rana.
Yeah. yes. So,
and in between, he also does a Anish Bazmi thank you.
So, he did a lot of that stuff also. He had to, that's where he was making more money. And then he did all this Hollywood. I mean, he went to act in Jurassic Park. It's a pretty bad film as such, but I'm sure he got paid really good money. He had a smaller role in Spider-Man, which probably was cut off. He was in Inferno, which again was a pretty bad film. But he did all of that because he wanted to explore what is happening in the West. He wanted to act with top-notch, Hollywood actors, which he did. Top-notch Hollywood directors. And yeah, he also made some good money, I'm sure.
Yeah, and also like talking about Hollywood, like there are so many good actors like Irfan in Hindi. What do you think it was so different in Irfan that made Hollywood cast him in so many potboilers?
Well, I think so. A couple of things happened. You see, Hollywood casting agents are very lazy. They really, they're very lazy because they once they know about one actor, they just don't think about anybody else. I mean, Dev Patel now has reached a stage where he's actually evolved into a very, very fine actor. But there was a time they were casting Dev Patel in practically every film. And what happened with Irfan, which is exactly what happened to Dev Patel, they managed to act, they were in a film called Slumdog Millionaire, which made so much money. And Hollywood producers, directors, studios, casting agents woke up to India. But they only saw 4 actors. They saw Irrfan Khan, they saw Anil Kapoor, they saw Frida Pinto, and they saw Dev Patel. I was in New York in those days, and you have no idea how many people would come up to me and say, "Oh my God, Frida Pinto is so good," and she's good. Nobody in India cared about who Frida Pinto was. Nobody in India even knew who she was. Even I didn't. I mean, I met her and I interviewed her, and she was a very fine woman. But there were all these Americans would come to me, "Oh, she's so pretty." I said, "Yeah, she's very pretty. I agree with you, but there are far prettier women in India than her." And so Irfan lucked out. Because of the fact that he managed to get an agent in Hollywood after Slumdog Millionaire, and that led to these big roles. Now, the second part of the issue is that some of the big Hollywood franchise films, Jurassic Park is a good example. Jurassic World, it was called. The Inferno series, the Dan Brown books. Often these films now do not do well in India, in the US. The US market has been lost for a very long time. And what the studios then do is they push these films in foreign countries. And they sell them in China, and they sell them in Europe, and they sell them in India, because these markets are very big. And now these films are, for a very long time now, when big Hollywood films like Spider-Man are released in India, it's not just released in English, it's also dubbed into Hindi and Telugu and Tamil and just like every language in India. So studios then start to think in terms of, okay, we got to put one Indian actor, we got to put one French actor, we got to put one Chinese actor. You know, the Fast and Furious, Deepika was in Fast and Furious, right? Or on this
No,
XS,
no.
Yes.
XXX.
XS, yeah. So
Mm.
if you see that particular thing, I mean, we talk about Deepika now, not Irrfan, but that film clearly was like a formula. There was the Chinese actor, there was the Mexican actor,
Yeah.
there was an Indian actress, because Hollywood studios thinking like that, okay, these are the markets, we can get the audiences to come to. That film was so bad, it bombed, didn't do well in
But
India.
it bond everywhere.
Yeah, and Deepika's performance was pretty bad. Also, she couldn't act in English. But having said that, that they can't tell in advance. Inferno, for instance, is a very good example. Inferno had all these actors. There were French actors, there were other nationalities, and they were all speaking in their own accents. It's not even important anymore that these actors. Irrfan's English was never very good. He had a very heavy Indian accent, as much as he tried to lose it. But he got those roles once the Hollywood system knew about him. Then they would only cast him. They didn't come looking for anybody else. Anil Kapoor got some work, but not much beyond that. And so even when films are not very challenging, I mean, again, these three films I've talked about, Inferno and Jurassic Park and Spider-Man, those are not really challenging acting roles for Irrfan. Life of Pi was definitely a very solid acting role for Irrfan. But he took them because there were big dialogues. He got to wear suits, and he got to look very cool in Jurassic Park. And he, I'm sure, made a very handsome sum of money. So...
Let's now talk about Irrfan playing the Shakespeare characters. Macbeth as in Maqbool, and of course Ruhdar in Haider. That Ruhdar was all charisma and an icing in the cake, I would say, for Vishal Bharadwaj masterpiece writing. So you also spoke to Vishal Bharadwaj. Anything he's discussed about why he cast Irrfan, or did he cast Irrfan thinking about the characters, or the characters were written thinking about Irrfan? Because Ruhdar was very different, it was a very different kind of role that was there in Haider.
Actually, I have to make the statement. I was not able to interview Vishal Bharadwaj for this book. I had interviewed Vishal Bharadwaj. I know Vishal Bharadwaj very well personally. Over the years, got to know him very well. He's come to New York, met him in Bombay, everywhere. Delhi, I met him also a few months ago. But I interviewed him for the Priyanka Chopra book, in which he spoke quite a bit about Priyanka and Irrfan doing those scenes together in Saath Khoon Maaf. What happened with this particular book was Irrfan was very unwell, and Vishal spoke to Irrfan that Aseem is writing a book, and Irrfan knew I was writing the book. Irrfan told him it's an unauthorized book. Now, Irrfan never told Vishal, don't give him an interview. But Vishal felt that he would be being sort of almost cheating on his friend. He said, I have a special friendship with him. I hope you'll understand. I can't talk to you because of the fact that I think he may not appreciate. I don't know what it was. Why did he cast Irrfan? I mean, what's remarkable is, of course, Maqbool, it took a while for them to cast Irrfan, and finally Irrfan was cast, and it was magical, absolutely. Saath Khoon Maaf was actually a Priyanka Chopra vehicle. There are 7 other stories, or 6 other male characters. All of them, from Nasiruddin Shah to Anu Kapoor, to all of them, John Abraham, they all play small roles, and Irrfan also plays a small role. But in Haider, Vishal could have given Irrfan a bigger role. Irrfan could have played K.K. Menon's role or something. I'm not sure why it all happened. And hats off to somebody like Irrfan that he felt so secure, even in doing a much smaller role, although the role was so magical. So this is something I read in some interview that Vishal Bharadwaj talked about after they had a private screening of Haider, that Irrfan came and gave him a hug because, Vishal had created a theme of Ruhdar. So there was a specific soundtrack, and Irrfan felt very elated and special with that. But what a wonderful ghost-like character, he creates, where, in fact, the very first time when he appears, slowly from the fade, we see this man limping and appearing.
The theme is playing and he's walking. So it feels like, before that entry, it's a different film. Then the film takes a different gear altogether.
Right. While it's still, again, it's a very small role. It's not a substantial role. there are three other main actors. I mean, whether it's Shahid Kapoor or Tabu or KK Men, but Irrfan did such a fine job in that role.
And then in the original book, it was like Hamlet's father's ghost who
But
is
yes,
driving all this thing. So
yeah,
in a way, the
मैं
ghostly
yeah,
डॉक्टर
thing,
की
and
रूह हूँ, he says, मैं
Ruhu,
डॉक्टर की
Ruhu,
रूह
yeah,
हूँ.
Doctor ki
yeah.
Ruhu. So
And he
yeah,
said,
somewhere all fits the bill.
yeah, and he talks about there's that wonderful, and I quoted that in the book. He says, "Ke मैं चिनार भी हूँ, मैं ये भी हूँ, मैं
ये
शिया भी
हाँ,
हूँ, मैं
मैं
रूह
शून्य
हूँ,
भी हूँ, मैं वो
हाँ,
ये हूँ, भगवान भी
That was a
हूँ. That
beautiful
one,
one.
yeah,
right,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
बिल्कुल, yeah.
yeah. So although he's a ghost-like character in this now, it's not a ghost himself, but he's a ghost-like character who had witnessed how Haidar's father was killed. So
Right, yeah. So
yeah,
again, talking about ghosts, we have this indie Qissa where he plays again a
yeah,
ghost.
yeah.
And that's also such a marvelous film. And it's so unfortunate that, it's so underrated, underwatched, I would say. So did you talk to Anup Singh and
Yes,
about that character? How did he build that up?
I spoke to Anup substantially because it's not just this film, but there's also another film called The Songs of Scorpion,
Songs of Scorpion, yes.
Yeah.
which has
With
not been
Golshifteh
shown in India
Farhani.
at all, except for maybe one or two festivals. And Anup has talked about now it'll probably be available online streams
Okay.
sooner or later. Anup was Anup had known Irrfan for a very long time from the early television days. And there was another connection which Anup doesn't want to talk about. Meeta Vashisht, who was Irrfan's classmate, used to be married to Anup once upon a time. So Irrfan got to know, he knew Meeta very well. He also got to know Anup very well, also from the television days. But then Anup moved on and I don't know, did his own stuff. Anup was very keen for Irrfan to play the role. Irrfan himself was very reluctant to initially play the role because he was worried that it's a very, very negative role where you have this man who mistreats his daughter because he's had 4 daughters or something. Then the last one is born and he just insists on raising that woman as a man. And so that just takes the story to a completely different plane, really, and then forces her to marry another woman. And then, of course, I mean, I don't want to give away because I think if people can watch Qissa, really, especially, but he's a very cruel man. And I quote Anup in the book where Anup talks about how Anup went back to see Irrfan because Irrfan first said no. Then Anup called him and said, "Can I come and see you tomorrow?" And Irrfan said yes. And the second time Anup went to see him, Anup said, I know that you love Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, the master Qawwali singer. And he says, when you see Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan performing, there's joy on his face and then he contorts his face and there are different emotions that come through that face, which result in this very fine piece of music called Qawwali. And he says, that's the kind of character I'm looking for in Qissa, where even when you are doing a lot of negative stuff or when you're doing good stuff also, it is the combination of that makes this character. And, quite honestly speaking, I've seen Qissa, I think 3 times now because it also, I had to watch it for the book. I had seen it earlier. The film grew on me also, but you start to feel so sorry for Irrfan's character. A lot of the tragedies that happen in the story are a result of his decisions, really. And he brings harm to a lot of people, but at the end of the day, the loneliness, and that's in fact the film the title is Qissa, the loneliness of a ghost. And only Irrfan could do that. I mean, again, he played Ashok Ganguly learning Bengali. In Qissa, he plays a Sardar and he had to learn Punjabi completely, even though he's from Rajasthan. Rajasthan is very close to Delhi and Punjab, but it was still a very, very alien language to him. And to become a Sardar, it was a big challenge for him. So there's another part where one day Anup, during the shoot, saw Irrfan standing in the corner somewhere and he was humming something to himself. He was singing something to himself. So Anup said, "What are you doing?" So Irrfan said, "I'm singing my dialogues." The only way he could remember the Punjabi dialogues and remember the ethos and the tone of the dialogues was by singing to himself. How beautiful is that? How many Bollywood, do you know any other Bollywood actor, any actor in India, who would do that?
True.
So, yeah. Qissa is a fantastic film. People should, your viewers should really find Qissa. It was on Amazon Prime for a while. Recently, it was also showing on Movie India. You know, so it keeps.
it's in movie now, so
It's still also movie.
definitely,
Yeah, yeah.
yes, definitely
So
people should watch Qissa.
people should watch it. Yeah.
Yes, to our viewers, it's currently streaming on Movie. You'll get in the library section. You should go ahead and watch it. A rare indie movie from NFDC. And like Aseem, you said that about, you already said that, but I cannot emphasize that point enough, that Irrfan is the character who should be loathed in this movie, in Qissa.
Yes.
The character he plays. You should hate him with all your guts.
Yes.
But then
Yes.
you end up empathizing with him. You feel
Yes.
for his loss, because there is such a humanity, even to the monstrosity he plays in the movie. He is a human. You can relate to the human in the person. So
First of all, you give Anup Singh a credit for that, because Anup Singh wrote and created such a well-formed, character that it's not a black and white at all. But then only an actor like Irrfan could do that. That he can create this empathy in himself, having played a role which is not a very likable person, and yet you realize his compulsions and what drove him to that. And there's also the reference to the partition, what partition did to a lot of people. Really, it played havoc with their mind and their rationality, reasonability. Yeah.
So talking about his acting, how much do you think, like, having teachers like Ram Gopal Bajaj Sahib, Prasanna and Barry John helped him inculcate the skills, and what did they have to say about him when we were writing the book?
Well, certainly he was very raw as an actor, because before that he'd done some very, very small. He'd done some interesting theater also in Jaipur, but he talked about how often plays were sort of inspired by Bollywood films, and he had to play like a Rajesh Khanna kind of a character or something like that. So, and then he comes to Bombay, he comes to Delhi to act in National School of Drama, and the only two role models he had were a man like Om Puri and Nasiruddin Shah. And so he started really, I mean, that's what happened. Many people do that when they have, especially when you're living in small towns, you've not watched many other films, and you see an actor like Nasiruddin Shah, and you're like, wow, what a brilliant, realistic performance. So Irrfan started imitating Nasiruddin Shah, which, a couple of his classmates, including Meeta, told me that he was completely like a Nasiruddin Shah. But what 3 years of drama school does, and with teachers like Prasanna and teachers like Ram Gopal Bajaj, but also working with your other colleagues or something like that, Irrfan evolved into a very different actor as compared to what he was. And so we see immediately after he graduated, the first thing we see of his is Drishti, where he was very young and he was acting opposite a very fine actress, Dimple Kapadia, who was a big Bollywood star also. Shekhar Kapoor also was an actor, director. And Irrfan on his own was able to stand up in the presence of these actors. So Irrfan, the actor, evolved and became the actor really by being trained by these wonderful directors, teachers. And the school itself, the atmosphere, the classmates, the books he read, the films he watched with Digmanshu Dhulia, and he would sit and watch all these Hollywood films with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro and Marlon Brando, which Irrfan had not had that exposure to before he came from Jaipur to Delhi. So all of that made him what he became eventually.
Right.
So just now, while we discuss, I remember about that scene in Maqbool where Om Puri and Nasiruddin Shah, they are manipulating Irrfan, and he is just sitting there thinking again and thinking against that. Such a beautiful
Right at the beginning, right? Right at the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And for a brief moment, he gets very excited about the fact that, okay, he could become and then he just sort of yells at him.
Controls himself.
Yeah. And then he yells at them like, shut up, kind of nonsense.
Right.
I think before we end this conversation, which is so interesting and overwhelming for us, of course, We would like Aseem to know one favorite scene of Irrfan. I know it's very difficult to choose one scene. Okay, we'll give you two. So you have to say two favorite scenes for Irrfan, and we also will go for one scene each. We will not choose the scenes which you have already done. So we'll give you the first chance. So two favorite scenes of Irrfan, and then we come to Arup and me. And
one is a comedy scene from Piku. It's a very comic scene. No, two comic scenes from Piku, but one especially. You know, he's at the Ganga Ghats with Deepika Padukone. They're both eating these kati rolls, kind of a thing, and she starts to say, because Irrfan is like, I can't believe you're taking care of this crazy old man, your father. And she says that when parents become old, they become children to you, and you have to take care of them. And they've also talked about whether Piku, you know, when will she get married? And she suddenly turns to him and says, she said that this will be a burden I have to take with me, whoever I marry. And then she says, "Tum karoge shadi mere saath?" And Irrfan says, "Matha kharab hai kya mera?"
Yes. Yes.
I can watch him do that "Matha kharab hai mera" so many times. But the other scene, just toward the end of Piku, when Irrfan's character he leaves Calcutta before Amitabh dies, and you know he wants to leave that day, and the water pump is broken, so there's no water coming. Remember? And they're all saying, "Ye karna hai, wo karna hai, plumber ko bulao." They're all screaming and yelling, and he's like very angry that he feels like they're using him basically, just because he has he knows how to drive a car. And so I watched the scene so many times because, you know, the cameras on Irrfan's character. Now, Irrfan, the actor, knows what he has to do because he knows the script very well. And yet he shows no signs because, naturally speaking, if a character is going through that situation, they don't know exactly, you know, like, I'm not sure how this sentence or my next sentence will be like and all. And suddenly at one point, he just says, "Arey, chup!" He just yells at them. Now, he shows no signs of the fact that he's going to yell at them. Irrfan, the actor, the Rana, the character, shows that, and they're also startled. They're just so shocked. And of course, then he goes and fixes it. And I love watching the scene again and again. Say that maybe he'll give something away. But if you, I think some scenes from, several scenes from Lunchbox. We haven't talked about Lunchbox, but there are scenes when he's standing in the balcony, smoking alone, or he's in the bus, or he's in the train. He's in the bus one time and his head is against the window, and the camera is almost like outside the bus and it's really on his face. And he just, oh my God, it is, he can play sadness. Like, it's so real that, you know, it just grabs you, your heart and your senses. He was so fine an actor, really. So, I mean, I can go on many other scenes, but you guys tell me, what are your favorite scenes?
So before we go, I think since you mentioned Lunchbox, you see that there is this subtle South Indian accent he gets to that, and that is so believable when he plays that. When he's sitting, he goes to Nawaz's house, and this is not my scene. I will do a different scene. All right, but I'll still tell you. When he go to Nawaz's house, and they are all having this dinner, and his wife, Nawaz's wife, asks, "Sir, aapka wife off ho gaya?" He just says,
"Off ho gaya." So it's not South Indian. It's a very Christian Bombay.
Oh yes, maybe.
Okay.
A very Christian Bombay, where the person, although he speaks in English also, but he speaks in Hindi. But it's a very Christian Bombay where they say things they use a few words only to be able to express the word. Yeah, because Hindi is not their first language. Yeah, he's off ho gaya.
Off ho gaya. Yes, Arup.
I think I will mention that one. You know, that was the one we mentioned in our video as well. So off ho gaya is okay. You know, till that is great, and then there is this pause for about 13-14 seconds. Then he says, "Lekin mera girlfriend hai." That is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. Like that expression, you know, he's happy, he's embarrassed, and yet he wants to tell that, yes, I have someone. It's like, I am also like you these days. So,
although he's never met
amazing.
his girlfriend.
No.
Yeah,
But he's in love with somebody.
That's right. Also in Lunchbox, like initially when the Lunchbox is coming, he's a bit curious. He's looking into the letters and reading. Slowly that gets into the habit, and the expressions every time it's changing. Every time the new Lunchbox is coming, the expressions are changing. You know,
can't focus on work. long
Yes.
before lunchtime, he's just looking in that direction.
Yes,
कि उसमें
yes.
क्या है और, हाँ.
And there's this next table guy who is like, why is this guy, so anxious?
At the end
So
of the day, it's
nicely
only
done.
lunch. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, every day the person falling in love more and more, he brought out that so emphatically. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be my scene, Shivadeep.
Okay.
Good pick.
So I am going to pick from a movie which I really like, and it was a multi-starrer, Life in a Metro. So,
Oh yes.
so
Yes.
and it has so many memorable moments, but there is one moment when this guy Irrfan Monty is about to get married, and he's meeting Konkona for the last time. Okay, and then he asks her, "Why did you reject me?" And Konkona says, "तुम गलत जगह देख रहे थे." And then he says, "You rejected me for that." मैं 37 का हो गया हूँ, you rejected me for that. You don't know. It is so natural. I can't believe you rejected me for that. देखो देखो मेरी तरफ देखो. and then he says, पता नहीं मेरी बीवी तुमसे मिलने देगी कि नहीं देगी इसके बाद.
I mean, just to add on, उससे थोड़ा continue करता हूँ क्योंकि उधर Konkona asked that like तुम शादी करके all of a sudden Irrfan starts crying.
Yes.
And then Konkona asks, रो क्यों रहे हो, शादी कर रहे हो, ये तो खुशी की बात है. To which Monty says, ये खुशी की आंसू है, मुझे नहीं पता तुमसे कब मिलूंगा. Then he asks, क्यों? I don't know, क्यों मेरी बीवी तुमसे मिलने देगी या नहीं. और वो Konkona says, वो मिलने नहीं दिया तो फिर मैं नहीं मिलूंगा. And that is, I mean,
just think about the range while we are talking about the scenes. Think about the range we are covering here.
Yes. His comic timings are very, very good. And then even in the end of the horse, when he chases her, and then when he meets her in the train, the smile on his face, it's lovely. Yeah,
lovely.
Amazing. Yeah.
As the scene on the rooftop when सब निकाल दो, chillao.
When they both yell, yeah.
You know, like even comic timing, I can think of a scene from Sunday actually as well. Arshad Warsi and Irrfan Khan, their camaraderie was so. I mean, obviously, no one acknowledges that film because of the top thing. So he is dressed as a Ravan, he is dressed as a Don. It's so bizarre. But he pulled off. He and Arshad Warsi both they're brilliant in comic.
Pull off just about anything. I mean, like I don't know if you guys saw the awful film called Rogue. In Rogue, he was he had this actress who was completely wooden. Her voice was dubbed in any case. Everybody was overacting, and yet
South African model.
Yeah, she was very gorgeous looking, but at the end of the story, and yet Irrfan had to. It's very hard when you have all the actors around you are really bad, then to be able to deliver some performance.
It's like turn up your scene now.
Actually, I was like from the light moment, I will be going into something little more intense in the sense like okay, well, this is very very personal. The thing like I'm a very sentimental guy. Odup knows it much more well. So there's three celebrities only: Rituparna Ghosh, Irrfan Khan, and Sushant Singh Rajput. When they passed away, like I was really very emotional, and I was looking into all these movies and all. A commercial movie actually, which was not probably one of his best, D-Day. I had watched it before, but after when we see Irrfan is no more, and I was watching one of the most scene towards the end where Arjun Rampal, they all capture Rishi Kapoor and Uma Qureshi, everyone is sitting there and they're having an altercation that, okay, we'll hand him over to Pakistan authority, Irrfan is saying, but Arjun Rampal is saying that go by the book, just kill him, because anyway they will be killing him. So, and then he says that, okay, do you think that they will spare you if you give Rishi, they spare your wife and son if you give them Rishi Kapoor? To which Irrfan Khan immediately calls and
his son.
His son Kabir says that Abbu aap aa rahe hain na hame lene. To which Irrfan pauses, closes his eyes while on phone. And we can see the pathos. He knows that about his fate, but doesn't want to express it. He takes a deep breath, open his eyes, forcefully laugh on phone. हाँ बेटा लेने आएंगे आपको. And then on explaining the white bike he would be riding. I mean,
even earlier than that, when he goes to leave his son and his wife at the airport.
Yeah.
And then he at that point itself, he's very well aware of the fact that this may be the last time he'll
Oh.
see them. And I remember he just, if you watch it again, he sort of wipes his hand against his mouth because he's
Yeah, right.
so
Yeah, right.
emotional.
Yeah, and we do like I was doing that a while back with the namesake thing, and then I turn off the video. When we see the scene, it's like it happened in real, like right then, and then it
Right.
happened real.
Yeah.
Something is inevitable. We
Yeah,
we don't have
yeah.
control on that. Just we
Yeah.
have to accept it.
Yeah.
Before,
So
yeah, Aseem, before we let you go, if you would like to, I don't know, summarize your view on, you've written an entire book about him, I know, but there's no point in asking you so many questions, but still, I want to know if you would summarize Irrfan the actor in a couple of lines, what would you say?
well, I think he had this unique quality that very, very few actors around the world really have. He could become somebody else, and he could understand the sadness, the joy, or whatever the character would be, and he would show that, and you forget that you're watching Irrfan. I mean, I think to me, we go to see Shah Rukh Khan's film because he's only Shah Rukh Khan at the end of the most of the time. Or you see, Akshay Kumar is often Akshay Kumar, but with Irrfan, you would forget it was Irrfan. We are remembering Rana, we are remembering Maqbool, we are remembering Ashok Ganguly because of the way Irrfan became those people. And I think that is a great actor's great quality. He leaves behind all these characters and all these roles. We know that he's the one who's acting and he's the one who performed them. But, we start to think about, we think about Sergeant Fernandez, the sad, lonely man, when he says, "Meri girlfriend hai," kind of a thing. So Irrfan made us believe in all of those characters. And the thing is that they were all, none of them were like over the top, glamorized kind of, maybe Maqbool little bit but they were very relatable, very believable. I mean, why do I like Piku so much? I'm from Delhi. And I know the CR Park area. I'm in South Delhi. I grew up in South Delhi. I know exactly what CR Park looks like. I know exactly the Bengalis living in CR Park are like. They're very Delhi Bengalis. And of course, Irrfan's character is not Bengali, but you just know these people. And therefore, when you know the character that Irrfan is playing, that's why, when he died, it felt like such a personal loss because he has left behind all these characters that we cared for and we loved so much. And we say like, my God, he's gone because because we loved him doing this and that. We're lucky that the films are still there for us to watch. We're lucky that we can keep having these conversations. Yes. But he was one of the greatest.
Yes.
So
I think, I cannot add to what you have already said. Aseem, once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not crying. It's just my eyes feeling scratchy.
We have all lost a piece of us with Irrfan's untimely demise. This discussion was therapeutic in a way where I think maybe we healed a little bit. So
yes.
I cannot.
I'm so grateful. This is, I've talked about Irrfan many, many times. This is one of the most special conversations I had. Plus, there were three of you, so you were able to bring different points of views, and perspectives, and ideas, and all. I'm really grateful that you guys asked me to join. I enjoyed this. I mean, it went on for an hour, but thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Aseem ji.
Yeah. All right, guys. Bye bye. Take care. Yeah.